Since childhood, we are taught that lying is wrong and that we should always speak the truth. But paradoxically, we also learn to avoid direct confrontations and to maintain harmony in social relationships. Calling someone a liar goes against these principles because it implies judging the other person, assuming a confrontational position, and often challenging social norms that prioritize politeness and good coexistence. Moreover, our brains are wired to seek patterns and coherence in the information we receive. When someone tells us something, our natural tendency is to accept it as true because doubting requires additional cognitive effort. This happens because the truth is the simplest way to process reality. Constantly questioning people's intentions places us in a state of alert, which is mentally draining, and thus we prefer to believe. Another factor that makes it difficult to call someone a liar is the fear of consequences. If we point out someone's lie, we are taking a risk. What if we're wrong? What if this accusation creates a conflict that harms us? In a workplace, for example, exposing a boss or colleague as a liar may lead to retaliation. In personal relationships, it may result in the end of friendships or create unnecessary tension. Many people prefer to ignore signs of dishonesty to avoid emotional strain and potential negative impacts in their lives. There's also the influence of culture. In societies that value collective harmony, like Japan, direct confrontation is frowned upon, while Western cultures tend to be more tolerant of opinion clashes. Still, we avoid direct accusations to not be seen as aggressive or problematic. Additionally, there's a psychological phenomenon known as the truth bias. This bias makes us, by default, believe the truth of the information we receive more than the possibility of it being a lie. This happens because most of our daily interactions are based on mutual trust. If we doubted everything all the time, we wouldn't be able to maintain healthy relationships or make quick decisions. This bias is so strong that even when we detect signs of deceit, we often find internal justifications to not take it seriously. Thus, even when there is clear evidence that someone is not being truthful, our initial instinct is to minimize the situation or seek another explanation before labeling the person as a liar. Another important point is that the liar themselves can contribute to this difficulty. People who lie well know how to manipulate emotions and present themselves convincingly. Many skilled liars master the art of deflecting accusations without directly denying them, creating confusion and leaving doubt in the air. Some even use their past honesty as a shield, reinforcing an image of credibility that disarms any suspicion. This makes it hard for us to definitively state that something is a lie, even when the behavior appears suspicious. In the end, calling someone a liar is challenging because it goes against our social conditioning, cognitive instincts, and even our fear of making a mistake and facing consequences. However, understanding this barrier is the first step to overcoming it. If we want to develop a sharper skill for detecting lies, we need to train our minds to analyze information with more coldness and less emotion, observing signs of deception without fear of confronting them when necessary. Most people believe they can tell when someone is lying simply by observing their behavior, but this confidence is often illusory. Detecting lies is not as simple as many imagine, and one of the biggest problems is that there are popular beliefs about signs of deception that in reality mean nothing. This leads to three very common mistakes that end up compromising the ability to assess the truthfulness of information. The first mistake is believing that avoiding eye contact means someone is lying. This is one of the most widespread myths about lie detection. Many people think that when someone can't look directly into their eyes, it indicates guilt or deceit, but this is not true. In reality, skilled liars know that this belief exists and make a point of maintaining prolonged eye contact to appear trustworthy. Additionally, some people avoid eye contact due to shyness, nervousness, or social discomfort, and this has nothing to do with lying. Studies show that truthful people can also look away when they are trying to remember something or process a more complex response. Therefore, judging someone solely by this criterion can lead to completely incorrect conclusions. The second common mistake is interpreting restlessness and nervous gestures as signs of lying. Often, when someone is fidgeting, touching their face, or tapping their feet, people assume that this agitation means the person is hiding something. However, restlessness can simply be a response to the stress of the situation. If someone is being interrogated, even if they are telling the truth, they may become anxious out of fear of not being believed. Moreover, some people have nervous tics or unconscious habits, such as touching their nose, scratching their head, or adjusting their clothes, which have nothing to do with deception. To make matters worse, in some cases, an experienced liar may appear extremely calm and controlled, precisely because they know that most people expect them to show nervousness. This means that relying on these signs can make an honest person seem guilty, while a skilled liar goes unnoticed. The third mistake is believing that long pauses or hesitant responses are clear signs of lying. Many people think that if someone takes a long time to respond, they are making up a story. However, hesitation may simply be a reflection of the person's mental processing. If an unexpected question is asked, even someone who is telling the truth may need time to organize their thoughts before answering. Additionally, introverted people or those who lack strong communication skills may seem insecure when speaking, regardless of whether they are being sincere or not. On the other hand, liars who have already rehearsed their stories can respond smoothly and confidently, as they have mentally prepared their answers. Relying on this criterion can make an innocent person appear suspicious, while a well-prepared liar may seem completely honest. These three mistakes show how common sense about detecting lies can be misleading. Instead of relying on isolated signs such as eye contact, nervous gestures, or speech hesitation, the ideal approach is to look for a combination of behaviors and patterns that genuinely indicate deception. The key to identifying lies more accurately is not to believe in popular myths, but to observe reactions strategically and in context without jumping to conclusions. CIA agents have developed a highly effective method for detecting lies quickly based on years of experience interrogating suspects, informants, and even other agents. Contrary to what many believe, lie detection does not rely solely on body language or obvious signs, but on a strategic system that involves observing both verbal and nonverbal responses, analyzing patterns that indicate deception. This method stands out because it does not depend on intuition, but instead on a logical process that can be applied in any conversation, whether in a formal interrogation or a casual conversation. The first principle of this method is to ignore signs of truth. This may seem counterintuitive, but one of the biggest mistakes in trying to detect lies is being distracted by behaviors that appear to reinforce someone's honesty. Lying individuals often use partial truths or irrelevant information to appear trustworthy. CIA agents learn to focus exclusively on signs of deception, filtering out information that doesn't directly relate to the question asked. If a suspect begins talking about their morals, reputation, or stories that don't directly answer the question, it can be a sign of diversion. The second principle is timing, which involves observing the person's first reaction immediately after the question is asked. Studies show that signs of deception often appear within the first 5 seconds after a difficult question. This is because when someone is lying, their brain needs to quickly process a response that seems convincing, avoiding inconsistencies and maintaining a coherent narrative. This can result in unexpected pauses, changes in tone of voice, evasive responses, or even emotional reactions that deviate from the person's usual behavior. If the first reaction includes questions like, "Why are you asking this?" or "Do you think I would do that?" instead of a direct response, it's already a strong indication that the person may be hiding something. The third principle is the search for behavior clusters. Rather than relying on a single sign, agents look for a combination of behaviors that indicate deception. A single deviation in eye contact, a nervous gesture, or a hesitation in speech does not necessarily mean someone is lying, but when these signs occur together and consistently throughout the conversation, the likelihood of deception increases significantly. This is one of the key differentiators of the CIA method. It does not rely on gut feelings or isolated assumptions, but on identifying patterns. Another essential element of the method is the formulation of strategic questions. Instead of asking generic questions like, "Did you do this?" trained agents use questions that force the suspect to provide details, such as, "What exactly were you doing at that time?" or "Describe everything that happened from the moment you arrived until you left." The more specific the question, the harder it is for a liar to maintain a coherent story without contradicting themselves. Additionally, presumptive questions like, "What did you do with the money?" instead of "Did you steal the money?" can prompt the suspect to reveal unexpected information. The CIA method also teaches that good liars avoid directly denying accusations. Instead of responding with, "No, I didn't do that," they may say something like, "I am an honest person," or "I would never do that." This type of response sidesteps the main point and manipulates the perception of truth without explicitly denying it. When an agent detects this type of strategy, they persist with the question, observing how the person reacts under pressure. By combining these principles, ignoring signs of truth, observing the first reaction, identifying behavior clusters, and asking strategic questions, Agents can detect lies with a level of accuracy far superior to that of ordinary people. The most impressive thing is that this method is not exclusive to high-level interrogations. It can be applied in daily life, in job interviews, negotiations, personal conversations, and even in the corporate environment. The key is to train the mind to process responses objectively, without being deceived by emotional distractions or well-crafted speeches. The idea that body language can reveal lies is deeply ingrained in popular culture. Movies, TV shows, and even self-help books suggest that crossing arms, avoiding eye contact, or nervously fidgeting with hands are clear signs of deceit. But is this really true? The answer is that body language on its own is not a reliable indicator of lying. Many of the behaviors we associate with deception are, in reality, natural responses to stress, discomfort, or even the individual's personality traits. One of the biggest myths about body language is the belief that liars avoid eye contact. The reality is that depending on the culture and personality of the individual, avoiding eye contact may simply indicate shyness, social discomfort, or even an effort to focus on what is being said. Furthermore, experienced liars know that this is a common stereotype, and they make a point to maintain excessive eye contact to appear trustworthy. Therefore, relying solely on this criterion can lead to completely wrong judgments. Another misconception is the idea that nervous gestures, such as fidgeting with hands, touching the face, or tapping feet, are clear signs of lying. Studies show that these behaviors are simply manifestations of anxiety and do not have a direct correlation with deceit. Someone being wrongly accused may show nervousness simply because they are under pressure and fear not being believed. On the other hand, a habitual liar may appear extremely calm, as they have already trained themselves on how to behave in questioning situations. The most significant mistake when trying to interpret body language is believing that a single isolated behavior can be proof of a lie. In practice, deception experts analyze patterns, not individual gestures. A single sign could simply be an unconscious reflex or a personal habit, but when multiple signs occur together and at the precise moment of a critical question, it provides a stronger indication that something isn't right. Despite all these myths, there are some bodily expressions that can indicate potential deception when analyzed in the correct context. Sudden changes in posture, micro-expressions of discomfort, and incongruent reactions between what a person says and how their body behaves can provide valuable clues. For example, if someone says they are confident but crosses their arms and subtly shrinks their shoulders, there's a conflict between the verbal message and the body language. This type of discrepancy can be a red flag for anyone analyzing the truthfulness of their speech. The truth about body language is that it should not be used as an infallible lie detector, but rather as a complementary tool. The mistake is treating isolated gestures as definitive proof of deceit. What really works is observing how the person behaves in relation to the questions asked, identifying clusters of signs of deception, and combining the analysis of body language with other factors, such as the content of the responses and the coherence of the narrative. Blindly trusting myths about body language could allow liars to escape detection while innocent people are unfairly accused. When someone lies, they typically try to manipulate others' perceptions to appear more convincing. Often this happens through careful word choice. Liars avoid directly denying, sidestep the issue, and try to persuade rather than simply telling the truth. There are certain phrases that repeatedly surface when someone is trying to hide something, and learning to identify them can help you recognize when someone is being dishonest. Here are 5 phrases commonly used to indicate deception. 1. To be completely honest with you, it sounds ironic, but when someone feels the need to emphasize that they are being honest, it's often because they're not. Honest people simply say what they need to say without reinforcing their honesty. This phrase acts as a psychological trick to gain credibility before delivering a lie or a distorted version of the truth. Why would I lie about that? This is a classic attempt to reverse the responsibility. Instead of answering the question directly, the liar forces the other person to justify why they would lie. It's a subtle way to divert the subject without explicitly denying it. A truthful person rarely feels the need to defend themselves in this way. They just answer the question directly. 3. I don't really remember that. When someone doesn't want to admit something but also doesn't want to directly deny it, this phrase comes into play. Saying they don't remember provides a safe escape in case the lie is later discovered. Moreover, when a person is truly innocent, they try to recall details to prove their innocence rather than avoiding the issue with vague answers. 4. You can ask anyone. When a liar feels their story isn't convincing, they try to bolster their credibility by referring to imaginary witnesses. The problem is that these supposed witnesses are often never mentioned by name or available for confirmation. It's a way to create a false sense of transparency without providing real proof. 5. I would never do that. This is one of the biggest classics. Instead of denying directly, the liar tries to position themselves as morally incapable of committing the action in question. The truth is, anyone can make mistakes, and when someone resorts to such an absolute statement, it may be a sign they are trying to cover something up. Honest people tend to respond with concrete facts, not dramatic declarations of innocence. These phrases, in isolation, don't prove someone is lying, but when they appear in suspicious context and are accompanied by other signs of deception, they can be a strong indication that the person isn't being entirely truthful. Now tell me, have you ever heard someone say any of these phrases? Leave a comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe. Lying is an incredibly powerful social tool, and in many cases, it's used so skillfully that it goes unnoticed, even when it seems obvious to some people. Some lies work so well because they exploit natural vulnerabilities in the human brain, take advantage of specific contexts, and are delivered by individuals who understand how to manipulate others' perceptions. The art of lying involves not just what is said, but how and when it's said, using techniques that make the listener believe without questioning. To understand why some lies are so effective, we need to analyze 3 main factors: the listener's predisposition to believe, the construction of a convincing narrative, and the liar's ability to control their behavior to avoid suspicion. The first factor that makes a lie successful is the truth bias. The human brain has a natural tendency to believe what it hears because constant doubt requires significant mental effort. Questioning everything all the time is exhausting, and therefore our instinct is to accept most of the information we receive as true. This bias exists because, throughout evolution, trust and communication helped humans cooperate and survive in society. If we were always suspicious of everything and everyone, group life would become unsustainable. The most skilled liars understand this cognitive weakness and exploit it to the maximum, telling their stories with naturalness and confidence, knowing that most people don't habitually verify information before accepting it as true. Additionally, many people want to believe certain lies. When a lie confirms something we already wish to be true, we are much more likely to accept it without question. This phenomenon is known as confirmation bias. This is why financial scams work. The victim wants to believe there's an incredible opportunity to rapidly multiply their money, so they ignore obvious signs that they are being deceived. The same happens in toxic relationships, where a person prefers to believe in false promises of change because admitting the truth would be emotionally painful. A skilled liar knows this and tailors their lie to align with the victim's expectations and desires, increasing the chances of it being accepted without resistance. The second element that makes some lies so effective is the structure of the narrative. An effective lie is not just a vague statement or a simple denial. To convince someone, a skilled liar constructs a story with a beginning, middle, and end, adding specific details to increase its credibility. The richer the narrative, the harder it is for the listener to realize that it's an invention. This happens because the human brain tends to trust more detailed and well-developed information. In addition to the richness of detail, effective liars use emotions to manipulate perception. When someone is caught in a lie, a common reaction is to become indignant or show a strong emotion, such as anger, sadness, or shock. This is done to divert attention from the logic and manipulate the other person into feeling guilty for questioning the veracity of the story. A person accused of something might respond in an exaggerated way, saying things like, "How could you think that about me?" Or, "This is absurd, I am deeply offended." Understanding these factors can help us recognize when someone is attempting to manipulate us through lies. Recognizing the biases, narrative techniques, and emotional manipulation involved in deception can allow us to question the story more critically and see through the facade. Silence is an underrated tool when it comes to detecting lies and manipulation. In a world where people are accustomed to speaking to fill any empty space, few realize that silence can be one of the most powerful weapons to expose the truth. When someone is confronted with a difficult question or is trying to hide something, the natural tendency is to fill the void with words, justifications, and unnecessary information. This is when liars often give themselves away. The main reason for this is that the human brain doesn't handle silence well during a conversation. When there is a pause, especially in high-pressure situations, anxiety increases and psychological discomfort manifests. For someone telling the truth, silence can simply be a moment of reflection before answering. But for a liar, it becomes a threat. The liar feels the need to fill the silence quickly to avoid suspicion, and in doing so, they often add unnecessary details, exaggerate explanations, or contradict themselves without realizing it. CIA agents and interrogation experts use this technique to obtain confessions and detect inconsistencies in testimonies. They ask a critical question and, after receiving an initial answer, simply remain silent. This forced silence creates an uncomfortable environment where the liar feels the need to continue speaking to justify their version. While an honest person answers directly and feels comfortable stopping there, the liar tends to feel the need to convince the other person that they are telling the truth. It's at this moment that they often reveal more than they should. Another important factor is that when someone is fabricating a story, silence disrupts their flow of thought. Lying requires more cognitive effort than telling the truth because the liar has to remember what they've already said, create coherent details, and anticipate possible doubts. When silence occurs, this process is interrupted, increasing the chance that the person will add inconsistent information or contradict themselves. This is why, often when an interrogator pauses strategically, the person starts to complicate things, trying to fill the space with unnecessary justifications. Additionally, silence can be used to test the confidence of a response. If someone answers quickly and confidently to a difficult question but begins to over-explain when faced with prolonged silence, it may indicate insecurity about their version of events. On the other hand, someone telling the truth doesn't feel compelled to keep talking. The silence strategy also works in negotiations and everyday confrontations. For example, if someone is trying to convince you of something suspicious, simply responding with an and remaining silent can often prompt the other person to continue talking, trying to reinforce their position. In doing so, they may expose contradictions or signs of deceit. Silence forces the other person to reveal their true level of confidence in what they're saying. In summary, silence is a powerful tool because it creates discomfort, interrupts the flow of the lie, and forces the liar to reveal more than they would like. To detect deception, sometimes it's more effective to stay quiet and observe than to press for direct questions. Those who master the use of silence have a huge advantage in any conversation, whether to expose lies, negotiate better. Asking the right questions is one of the most effective ways to unmask a liar. Often people fail to identify a lie because they ask overly direct questions that allow for short, rehearsed answers. Skilled liars know how to sidestep with vague or brief negative responses, but when confronted with strategic questions, they struggle to maintain consistency and eventually expose themselves. The first technique is to ask open-ended and detailed questions. Instead of asking, "Did you do this?" which can easily be answered with a simple no, it's better to ask questions that require longer explanations, such as, "What exactly did you do at that moment?" or "Describe everything that happened from start to finish." This forces the liar to create a more complex story, which increases their chances of making mistakes or contradictions. People telling the truth tend to respond fluently and consistently, as they simply recount the facts, while liars need to fabricate and maintain a fictional narrative, which requires more mental effort. Another effective technique is to ask the same question in different ways and at different times. When someone is lying, they try to memorize the version of the story to avoid inconsistencies. But if the same question is asked in a different way at another point in the conversation, there's a strong chance that the liar will add a detail that contradicts something they said earlier. For example, if someone claims they got home at 8 p.m. and later when asked again, they mention stopping somewhere unexpected, that could indicate inconsistency. This type of trap works because the truth is easy to remember, but a lie needs to be constantly adjusted. A particularly effective approach is the use of presumptive questions. Instead of asking, "Did you steal the money?" which can be easily denied, a smarter question would be, "What did you do with the money?" This technique makes the liar think the interrogator already has proof or concrete information against them, which might cause them to hesitate, show nervousness, or even reveal part of the truth unintentionally. Another technique that unravels a liar's speech is the use of precision questions. Liars tend to give vague and generic answers to avoid contradictions, so a good interrogator insists on specific details. If someone says, "I was out yesterday," a precision question would be, "Exactly what time did you leave and return?" If the person starts hesitating or tries to avoid answering directly, that could indicate the story isn't entirely truthful. Moreover, it's possible to explore the liar's discomfort with unexpected questions. When someone is rehearsing a lie, they usually build a linear and logical story, but aren't prepared for off-pattern questions. Sudden interruptions such as "what were you wearing" or "who else saw you there" can catch the liar off guard and lead them to make mistakes. People telling the truth may need a moment to remember, but they generally provide consistent information, while liars may give contradictory responses or try to change the subject. Lastly, a powerful technique is to let the person hang themselves with their own words. If a liar seems confident, the best thing to do is encourage them to talk more. The more details they add to the story, the greater the chance they will contradict themselves. Often liars over-explain because they want to seem convincing, but in doing so, they end up revealing information that betrays them. The key to unmasking a liar is not just detecting obvious signs of deception, but asking strategic questions that force them to maintain a flawless narrative. Mastering these techniques makes it much easier to identify lies, as it turns the liar into their own biggest trap. Throughout history, several iconic moments have exposed liars in real time, whether in interviews, trials, or investigations. Body language experts, interrogators, and even the public have witnessed lies being dismantled live, revealing that no matter how convincing a liar may be, the truth always leaves traces. Here are some of the most emblematic cases where lies were detected in front of millions of people. One of the most famous examples is the case of Bill Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky scandal. In 1998, during a televised speech, the then President of the United States categorically stated, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Ms. Lewinsky." This phrase became iconic in history because experts pointed out signs of deception in his tone of voice, the exaggerated emphasis on his denial, and how he diverted his gaze at critical moments. Later, evidence proved that Clinton had lied, and he eventually admitted to the affair. The scandal not only compromised his credibility, but also served as an example of how emphatic denials and carefully rehearsed phrases can indicate deception. Another iconic case was the interrogation of Lance Armstrong, the seven-time Tour de France champion, who vehemently denied using performance-enhancing drugs for years. In various interviews, Armstrong displayed extreme confidence while denying the allegations, but behavior analysis experts began to notice subtle patterns of deception. His strategy included evasive responses, repeating rehearsed phrases, and attacking the accusers to divert attention. Eventually, he publicly admitted in an interview with Oprah Winfrey that he had used banned substances, revealing how a well-constructed lie can last for years, but not indefinitely. A landmark moment occurred in the case of Bernie Madoff, the man responsible for one of the largest financial pyramid schemes in history. For years, Madoff deceived billionaire investors, presenting an air of security and credibility that made no one question his honesty. However, when the 2008 financial crisis exposed inconsistencies in his scheme, he was interrogated and his lies began to crumble. Analysts observed that during interviews, Madoff avoided providing specific details about his investments and frequently used vague excuses to justify discrepancies. When pressed, he avoided direct answers and diverted the conversation to general topics. His lie collapsed when the evidence mounted, leading to his arrest and conviction. One of the most shocking moments in recent history was the case of Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of Theranos, who deceived investors and the public by promising a revolution in the blood testing industry. For years, Holmes was celebrated as a visionary, but experts noticed that in interviews, she avoided answering technical questions directly and repeated generic phrases about innovation. When she was finally exposed, analysts revisited her interviews and realized that her lies were sustained by the use of empty phrases and constant deflection of more objective questions. What all of these cases have in common is that while the liars were convincing for a time, patterns of behavior, exaggerated denials, evasive responses, and emotional manipulation attempts eventually revealed the truth. In interviews, trials, and public statements, experts know that lies have one fatal characteristic: the more they are sustained, the harder it becomes to keep them intact. In the end, these iconic moments prove that no matter how well-crafted a lie is, the truth always finds a way to come to light. Knowing how to identify lies is not a skill exclusive to CIA agents or interrogation experts. In daily life, this ability can be used to improve negotiations, avoid scams, better understand the people around you, and even strengthen your personal and professional relationships. When you learn to recognize patterns of deception, you begin to see conversations in a completely different way, noticing details that were previously overlooked. One of the most beneficial areas for this skill is negotiation. Whether at work, when making a purchase, or closing a contract, knowing when someone is hiding information can help avoid losses. If a salesperson insists they're offering the best possible price, observing their body language and responses might reveal if there's room for negotiation. Similarly, if a recruiter or boss makes vague promises about future raises, noticing signs of uncertainty can prevent you from having unrealistic expectations. The secret here is to use strategic questions and the power of silence. Often, by staying silent after an argument, the other person feels the need to talk more to justify their position, and that's when inconsistencies arise. In job interviews, this skill can be used to assess the honesty of the recruiter and protect yourself from manipulative questions. Some companies make vague promises about benefits and growth without offering concrete guarantees. If you notice that the recruiter avoids giving direct answers or deflects when asked about salary, bonuses, or company culture, it may be a sign that something is being omitted. On the other hand, if you're the one being interviewed, knowing these techniques can help you avoid falling into traps and respond more confidently. In personal relationships, detecting lies can be the difference between maintaining a true friendship and being manipulated by someone. Not every lie has a severe impact, but when it comes to betrayals, hidden intentions, or emotional manipulation, knowing how to identify patterns of deception can prevent unnecessary suffering. Often, lies in relationships come with generic phrases like "you're overreacting," "why would I do that?" or "that's just in your head." The problem isn't just in the lie itself, and even people trying to deceive emotionally are all too common. The rule here is the same. The more detailed and convincing a story seems, the more attention you should pay to small signs of inconsistency. In many scams, criminals create a sense of urgency to get the victim to act quickly, without time to question the veracity of the story. If you learn to slow down and analyze the narrative, you'll notice that there's always something that doesn't quite fit. In the professional environment, this skill can help you deal with manipulative colleagues and dishonest bosses. Some people try to blame others, make promises they can't keep, or distort information for their own benefit. Knowing how to identify these situations allows you to better protect yourself and make more strategic decisions about who to trust and how to react in conflict situations. In the end, lie detection is not about judging people or becoming paranoid, but about seeing reality more clearly. The more you practice, the more intuitive this becomes. And over time, you'll be able to identify patterns of deception effortlessly. Whether in business, interviews, or relationships, this skill gives you a huge advantage, helping you avoid traps and make smarter decisions. We've reached the end of another video. I want to thank you for sticking with me until the end. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That's the only way you'll stay informed and keep evolving. Thank you, and see you next time.